Guild Wars 2 is finally out, and it's the game we've all been waiting patiently for, right? Well, not exactly. With all the promises and speeches ArenaNet delivered leading up to the game's release, I have to admit that I expected the next revolution in MMOs. I'm an idiot, right? I mean, the same mistake has happened so many times in the post-Warcraft world. Dungeons & Dragons Online, Lord of the Rings Online, Tabula Rasa, Age of Conan, Aeon, Warhammer Online, Champions Online, Star Trek Online, Darkfall, Spiral Knights, Final Fantasy XIV, LEGO Universe, Vindictus, DC Universe Online, Rift, Terra, The Secret World. Yeah, you get the idea. I get hyped for a game that will finally improve and revolutionize MMOs as we know them, and then they're released really not much different than anything that came before them. Much like all of those other games mentioned, I had fun the first few hours of Guild Wars 2. I created my character, entered the world, and started playing. Visually, the game looks pretty good for an MMO, but what really struck me as above and beyond the average game was its aesthetics. Guild Wars 2 feels like a living painting. ArenaNet did a fantastic job on everything art-related. The scenery is fascinating. Every area is eye candy. Minor things like load screens and the map have a painted canvas look and feel to them, tying the entire effect together. Even something as simple as jumping in water generates drops of blue watercolor paint on the screen. Meanwhile, jumping out of water causes a blurry rain-on-camera effect, something I've never seen done in an MMO before. Granted, if this were Call of Duty and I was talking about blood splatter on the screen, then I'd obviously have a more negative tone of voice. But in Guild Wars 2, the effect works. The artists at ArenaNet have created a work of art inside of a video game, and that doesn't even end with visuals. The soundtrack is incredible, some of Jeremy Soul's best work yet. I generally tend to mute out music immediately in any MMO, but I've kept it on up until this point, and I'm still enjoying it. Anyway, back to the part where I've entered the world after creating a new character. My first few hours were fairly enjoyable. The interface was a bit confusing at first, but after completing a few hearts, which are just clever names for quests, it all mostly clicked. I explored the first zone and participated in events, while completing quests here and there. This is somewhat enjoyable. I wonder how the next zone will be different. Before I continue, let me make it clear what ArenaNet's intentions were with Guild Wars 2. The lead designers have said many times that they hate conventional MMOs and thus don't want their game to be like them. The biggest aspect of this that they've been pushing is the fact that their game has minimal grind. So how does ArenaNet achieve this goal? They removed the endgame. Guild Wars 2 is not about burning through a set amount of levels to get to the enjoyable content. Instead, all of the enjoyable content is available from the moment you begin. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. You see, leveling in MMOs has never really been fun. Sure, it might be cool to start a new character and see what abilities they use, but in general, it's almost unanimously agreed upon that it's a long, boring grind. It may be somewhat interesting to see your abilities in action at first, but kill X boars and loot X items gets old very quickly. Guild Wars 2 removed the part of the game that most MMO players enjoyed and barely changed the parts of the game that players didn't. Instead of going up to NPCs and picking up a handful of quests, objectives just appear on the map as you explore. The content is largely the same as nearly every MMO you've played in the last 10 years. Kill mindless NPCs who stand around in fields doing nothing, interact with static models, escort NPCs in extremely scripted sequences. It's really something you've probably played 100 times before. ArenaNet tried to mask the fact that it's the same as always by replacing the X out of 10 text to a meter that fills up as you complete these actions. In their defense, they've tried to improve in other areas. Exploration, which is a large reason why I was so excited for the game in the first place, is largely canned. Nearly every point of interest is marked on the map. Roughly once per each zone, there's an unmarked area that involves jumping and climbing. These were by far the highlight of the 35 hours I've spent playing the game, but they're far and few in between. The other areas of the game, structured PvP and world versus world versus world, are also relatively disappointing. Wub 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 is a lot like Alterac Valley in vanilla World of Warcraft. Massive blobs of players shooting spells at, well, massive blobs of players. It's a numbers game, and it's very difficult to stand out as an individual in the game mode. Structured PvP isn't necessarily badly made, it just doesn't really do anything better than any other MMO ever. Upon entering this mode, your character immediately has access to the best gear in the game and is leveled to max to make sure that everyone is on an even playing field. It would have been awesome to see Guild Wars 2 be the next big game I play for a long time, but unfortunately it just has no long-lasting appeal. The leveling is as dull as other MMOs, there's no drive to actually get to max level, and the PvP is nothing to write home about. Before I end this video, I want to answer a question that may be on your mind as you're watching this. If you didn't like any of those MMOs you mentioned at the starting of this video, then maybe it's not the games, maybe you just don't like the genre. I've asked myself this question many times. The truth is, I do love MMOs. World of Warcraft was an amazing game in 2004. MMOs just forgot that there exist other ways of doing combat or leveling or even questing. Grawl Online was one of my favorite MMOs way back in the day. Unofficially, it was the Zelda MMO Nintendo never made. It had a giant questline similar to any single-player Zelda games, but you could participate with other players, create your own worlds and send them in to the game's creator, and play all kinds of minigames like capture the flag or even something as simple as hide and seek. My point isn't that Grawl Online was the epitome of MMOs and that everyone should look at it for guidance, but it's that there are other ways to make massively multiplayer online games without copying EverQuest. And I'm just waiting for that one to come along.